Hello, bonjour, Henny. We're back here on the Tunica Biloxi tribal territory in the Tunica Biloxi Nation in the newly built tribal courthouse.
Yep.
And it was actually built by a friend of Télévision, Stephen Ortego, qui parle aussi français, mais qui vient de Lafayette. So it's kind of cool that it was kept in the Louisiana family, beyond the tribal family. And so we're here to speak to Luke a little bit about the tribe, tribal sovereignty, what it means to be Tunica Biloxi today, and what it means to be sovereign as a tribe in America in 2025. Does that sound good?
100%. Henny, imunakushimele tisha, imuoni halekino panu. Takash, thank
Takash.
you. Thank you. Takash means thank you in our language. Thank you for having me on your podcast today. The sovereign, sovereignty is a very important word,
Yeah, so to start with that, like, what does that mean when you think of, because sovereign is a term that, like, actually is very important, obviously, to, like, many democratic systems around the world, and non-democratic systems, but it's an especially important term in the U.S. tribal law system and in Indian, culturally in Indian reservations and in Indian tribes in general. So, like, when you think of sovereign, what does that mean to you?
I mean, like, you could get to the legal terms about the document discovery and go all the way back into that. However, I prefer not to get into that stuff today because I think the idea of sovereignty is much deeper than that idea of, the legal side. I think sovereignty is given to us by the Creator, by God, whoever you call it. We are the Tunica Biloxi people, the Yoni Haliik people of this land. Like, we are stewards of this land. We do, it's for the Creator. Like, it's our sovereignty is not given to us by no government. Obviously, legally, yes, but when it comes to taking care of the land, making sure the air is fresh, making sure the food's fine, that's sovereignty given us from the Creator. And we practice that sovereignty when we just dance, when we sing, when we practice our when we practice our words, our languages, because, like, end of the day, people are going to say, oh, this is controlled by the United States. How about in 500 years, not even 550 years from now, when we can't breathe the air, when the food is $20 for a tomato, we already see all those prices going up. So the only sovereignty that, to me, that's really true is who takes care of the land for the next 7 generations, for, our next ones. And that's sovereignty, for me, is given to by the Creator. Because, look when we take care of our land, like, it's a beautiful building,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then speaking, though, of that makes a lot of sense, of course. And speaking of, like, the political or the legal side of it, though, my understanding is that in the U.S., the Tunica Biloxi were one of the first tribes to get federal recognition through the federal recognition process, or at least the first in Louisiana.
So we were one of the first in Louisiana. I do believe that Chicamacha was the first tribe in Louisiana to be federally recognized. We were the first one to have a land casino in the state of Louisiana, so that's why a lot of people look into that. However, could you go back to the beginning of the question again?
Just about that, there was, what was the process of getting
federally
recognized?
1934 was the Indian Reorganization Act, and that's when they started, the American government was like, oh, we need to do something about, American Indians, as, like, the average lifespan for us was, 40 years old, all that, byproduct colonization, centuries of that. So for me, it was, in 1981, we got our federal recognition, so 50 years later, and funny story how we got that, so the Tunica Biloxi, we actually have the largest treasure from the 18th century in all of the Americas when it comes to Indian artifacts. However, during the Indian Reorganization Act, the federal government sent people down and said, there's no Indians here. So they crossed us out, right away, and, no tribe got federally recognized because they said we didn't exist.
Got it.
We did, but obviously they didn't want to do their job. But even then, that became, our people always advocated. We went to D.C., we got denied at D.C., so it was a long time coming. But in the 1970s, a Harvard archaeologist, I believe, was working. I forgot his name. However, he did discover the Tunica treasure by a local prison. And practically, like I said, the treasure is, like, at that time, was most any artifacts from the 18th century because we traded with the French.
Right, exactly.
Like, even the Tunica Biloxi is, it's French, actually. Yoni Haliik, even Tunica, like, that has French meaning, but the word, how it is evolved today, we have French heritage. Like, everyone in my tribe, one of the grandparents, great-grandparents, everyone spoke French at one point.
French.
So, all French heritage, very, very proud about great heritage, very proud about great cultures, but, yeah.
And then, so then since then, like, what has been the process of, like, tribal citizenship, and at that time and then thereafter, like, who was counted as part of the tribe? And you know what I'm saying?
This is always a very like people are like I love you brought this up because this is like one of the most important topics because like people don't have like they see me they're like oh he kind of looks American Indian he also kind of looks white you know people it depends what the
Right.
area and everything. However, it's like people have a very blood quantum. It's a very racist. Like when they brought blood quantum, the reason why they brought blood quantum was to erase us.
Right.
It was just the slaves like oh you're 1%. It was to take your land, just take us. So it's like oh you got checked out eventually so we could take your land. The only things that got blood quantum in the United States is hearses and me, Indians.
Right.
So it's a but also like a lot of American Indians because of colonization, we are not educated about our culture. So like we are put into society like oh we got blood quantum. I guess I'm only 1/5 American Indian, which is not true at all because, like I said, both my parents are Native American. My dad's Mexican. My mom's American Indian. If you looked at them, you won't always say my dad's Native American because we got colonized in 1541, the Tunica Biloxi. My tribe was colonized very, very early on by the Spanish. So that began the civilization, almost 500 years ago. So
Right.
most tribes, they didn't get colonized until the 1800s and, fought full-on colonization. So obviously, we're going to be, assimilation, people, tomorrow people.
Right. No, exactly.
Yeah, and even going back, I said, like, we just came back from the mounds, they're 2,000 years old, the mounds. The mounds up north in Louisiana are 10,000 years old. Like, obviously, there's not going to be, like, the same people from 10,000 years ago to now. We're a civilization, advance, evolution, we believe as American Indians that the next 7 generations, even the one below us, will always be better. And, as peoples, we'll all come together and, we have people from all groups, all colors in our tribe. And we're the rainbow people.
The rainbow people.
Yeah.
I love that. And so it's interesting what you're saying about the rainbow, like you're a rainbow people.
Yeah.
And so how does that work like racially within the tribe? Like, was there also black ancestry here?
Oh, yeah.
Because of the melting pot, and was that a controversial topic at the time of enrollment, and who was going to be let into the tribe and not?
So that is a big, so our tribe, not so much because we all knew our history. We all knew, like, we were always advocating for a long time. Actually, Vine Delora Jr., who's one of the most regarded American Indian minds.
Got it.
He actually worked with a lot of tribes in Louisiana, and it was like, these are like tribes that are actually like, so ancient in culture and everything. Obviously, but through, civilization, colonization, we lose pieces. However, Vine Delora Jr. played a big role in like educating people. And going back to the race specifically, it's like, what is race? What is American Indian? And that's also like previously speaking about my parents because like, you could literally be 100% European and be Tunica Biloxi.
Right.
That's what people understand. And most of my tribe, for example, we've been assimilated since 1541. No one in living has a great-grandparent or grandparent or parent that's 100% American Indian or real close. This idea was like, oh, my blood quantum, for example, like going back to blood quantum. Like my great-great-grandmother is 100% American Indian on blood quantum.
Okay.
She wasn't 100% American Indian. Both her parents were sharecroppers.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes, she was actually Afro-Indigenous. Most of my tribe has Afro-Indigenous ancestry. I have Afro-Indigenous ancestry. Obviously, my grandma like white guys, so you give me. But it's very important to like recognize like throughout like the 17th and 18th century when colonization was happening. Obviously our people were like living in the woods, living in the swamps, being away from all that stuff. But obviously there would be escaped slaves that would come in, and their family. We took them in because it's the same fight against the white man that we had to go against, and it became a very, very beautiful culture. That, like I said, in my opinion, like the reason I'm from Chicago, and I love coming, like Chicago's a culture place, but it got nothing going down here because like the culture of our peoples and everything it's centuries. It goes into music comes from here. Louisiana. So I'm very, very proud of the African resilience in our tribal history because a lot of our spirituality also came from Africa as well. A lot of the traditions people practice is and it's a very, very thing that we need to praise. We need to uplift and black is beautiful, red is beautiful.
Totally.
Yeah.
So then how does that work though in terms of like contemporary racial politics? Like how do you feel that people in the tribe are like connected or not connected?
I think Indian country as a whole, I could kind of explain
yeah.
So it's like we went to National Congress of American Indians last year as my chairman ran to become the National Congress of American Indians is the biggest organization for American Indians, non-federal government. So when he ran, one person came up to him, tribal leader, they said, I didn't know tribes from Africa could run. So a lot of, we go back to that racial stereotype of the American Indian, because a lot of us American Indians, like, 1800s, you know, like they view us in the village, you know, back in the 1800s. Even a lot of our own people, they don't see, like, you know, we're always evolving, you know. It's just because you're a different skin color than me doesn't mean you're more Indian than me. That's a very racist.
Right.
It literally comes from KKK, white supremacy. When you see these laws that are passed on the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act, a lot of the people that are passing these laws of Bud Cronton were also the KKK. So it's like we could go back to it because it's the whole point of it was to erase us.
And so, like, in this area, were there people who were both in the tribe and in the KKK?
So I can't give for certain about that, but
or were there people that had maybe Indian ancestry and
Yes,
then also were in the
100%,
KKK?
100%,
That probably
100%,
happens across. That probably
100%.
happened across America during Jim
Yeah.
Crow, obviously. And do you think part of that dynamic is kind of like, I know there's an interesting quote that people say in like the Cajun and Creole dynamic. I don't know what it is exactly, and I need to find out who the source is.
Yeah.
But there's something about like when the Americans came to Louisiana, the Cajuns like made a deal with the devil because then they could be the manager, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then the like the Anglos from Texas and Oklahoma were still like the owners, right?
Yeah.
But then the Cajuns, it's like, okay, well then the racial dynamic changed where skin color became more important than like language, and so then Cajuns were still discriminated against, but then there were a caste above Black Creoles at the same time. And so do you think that might have been a similar dynamic with certain like white passing Indians, that they could be like, okay, we're not Black at least? Or do you know what I'm saying? At that time, was that
the lowest
part
thing
of
to
it?
be in Louisiana? No one wanted to be Indian because they were talking about in the stories I hear from my elders.
Right.
You know, the white kids would get the books, the Black kids would get the beat up books, the Indians would get no books.
No books,
So
right.
a lot of the people in our tribe were first to be like, I'm Black. You know, I'm just Cajun. I'm not.
Or just white.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just
right.
white.
Cajun,
You know, I'm
yeah,
just
right,
whatever.
yeah.
I'm just white. You know, I'm just Mexican. I'm not. You know, I'm not Indian.
Right.
So there was definitely like legally they had to pick a side. It's like, yeah, I am Black because being Black is a step up in being from Louisiana.
Right.
You know, because we weren't even allowed to go to school. You know, a lot of in the 1970s, 50% of my tribe never walked into any type of formal education.
Right.
Because it was illegal.
Right. And did y'all have an Indian school up here or no?
No.
Okay. Because I know that exists in some parts of
Yeah.
America, like missionaries in some parts of Louisiana even. Okay, cool. So literally no school. So then now though, since federal recognition, obviously it's opened up a lot of stuff to you guys, a lot of good things, but then there's also
Yeah.
complications we can get into. But then just sticking on the racial point, one thing that comes to mind is like racial politics is like big in the news right now
Yeah.
because of like the new Trump administration and the backlash to DEI. Kind of the idea being that, well, some of the idea being that all of it was worthless, but then another idea, which I think is more of the mainstream position, is that America had problems of racism, but then now we're kind of like talking about it and obsessing it over too much.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of like be normal again, right? I'm
No,
not
you're
saying
saying
I
you
think
give
this,
them
I'm just trying to
yeah,
summarize it.
yeah.
And the thing is that what's interesting, and this is what I want to ask you, is that way of thinking during the 2016 election, some people thought that it would turn off minority groups from Trump, which it did to some extent.
Yeah.
But then this time around, it seems like that way of thinking was able to make inroads with, not to a majority, but with Blacks, Hispanics, and my understanding is even in certain parts of Indian
No,
country, but it
100%.
varies from tribe to tribe. And so that's what I was wondering about, like, for you, do you think that like kind of like, let's stop talking about race, we're all just Americans,
No, I would
is
say-
tempting in the tribe, or?
White supremacy is very real. That is the rule. That is the ruler of our tribe. I would like to make that very clear. White supremacy is the ruler in the state government, the federal government, even in our own tribal nation in Louisiana. And it's a very unfortunate thing because, like I said, we do have a very visible Afro-Indigenous chairman. However, we still do receive a lot of racism and even anti-Indian sentiments within the tribe because it wasn't popular to talk the language long ago.
Right.
It wasn't popular to dance long ago. It was actually kind of viewed as more like witchcraft from a lot, because like I said, because it was taken from us, but
Right.
it was very, it was tough growing up Indian because even in your own tribe, it wasn't, you know, because like I said, it was outlawed, but it was very tough and it almost like you could, for example, like we don't have any council members that speak the language.
Right.
That kind of show, like you said, you know, we're all outlawed, but we have hundreds of kids that speak the language now. In 2010, we worked at the University of Tulane. We revitalized the language. You know, people kept the stories alive. We actually had the last Tunica chief, Chief Sesri, in the 1940s, wrote a book on how to speak Tunica to save the language and to bring it back today. And now we have, you know, Ryan Lopez, a fluent speaker, Elizabeth. You know, we have, you know, people that speak in the language now. So it's just, white supremacy is very real, and it goes back to the language. You know, like the first thing, like they took the language from us, and
Right.
so practically people are telling me that's like English is from Europe. That should be how we are ruled, you know, a foreign language. And that goes back to white supremacy, and said that goes back to my own tribe because my own tribe's constitution is written in English.
Right.
So, you know, we have to look at ourselves too because, like I said, my paper, our founding documents, is English.
Right.
That's-
No,
that's a
totally. And
problem.
I think that's why like indigenous communities where there is some level of that's more conservative or some level of Trump vote, I think is like
Yeah.
very interesting in these times because a lot of the debate about is like, are we just Americans or can we be like ex-American too?
Yeah.
Is like, can you be Mexican American or Indian American or whatever, American Indian, right? Because obviously you guys, it's a
Yeah.
different thing because the rest of us are immigrants. But at the same time, it's like, is it okay to accept that there's different kinds of Americans and then at the same time say we can all be Americans? You know what I'm saying? I think that's
Yeah.
part of the debate. And so I just think it's interesting, like somewhere like here, and especially, I imagine if I went around, like everyone clearly by the fact that you're showing up at the powwow, like you care about being Indian, you care
Yeah.
about your tribe, you care about your identity, you care about your culture. And then it's interesting though at the same time we have some pushback against that, right? Like that's some views. And so I think that's just always complicated. Like we're all more complicated than we seem. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe you're black,
Yeah.
but you're not just gonna vote because you're black, because you might have gone to college and law school, and then that might give you something. You might be Black Creole, and that might give you a different perspective.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like this community is so interesting. It's like, yes, you're indigenous, but you guys have a little like Creole, and you got some
Yeah,
Cajun, you got some
no, it's crazy.
Black Creole, and so it's like, and then it's rural, but then you're also like in a diaspora.
Yeah,
and
we're a
so
crazy
a
community.
Houston Tunica Biloxi person probably thinks a lot of different ways in common with a Avoyles or tribal reservation Tunica Biloxi person, but also probably has a lot of
Yeah.
different life experience. And so what do you feel like, how are you guys able to keep that commonality at the same time, right? Like you looking like you look and other people looking a little different,
Yeah.
you living in Chicago, other people living down here. What is like the common thread?
I mean, like, we're next to that connection because, like, it's crazy. Like, you might not speak to this person your whole life, but once you start speaking to them, coming from the same tree, it's like, this person thinks exactly like me. And it's like, I've been around the tribe for the past 6 years. I've obviously been around my tribal family my whole life, but, down in Louisiana for the past 6 years. And it's just like, everyone I meet, I'm like, oh, that's like a little different part of me. Obviously, you said like growing up in Marksville is different from growing up in Chicago, different from growing up in Houston. You got different life experiences. You might speak a little French. You might
Right.
speak a little Spanish. You might be mi padre es Mexicano. My dad, so I was like, am I Mexican? Am I Indian? To be honest, like I'm just a human.
A little bit of everything.
Imo-oni.
Or a little bit of a few things.
Yeah,
at
I'm
least.
just a human.
But so then that's really interesting. And then like that, so that's like the identity point. And so I think what's
Yeah.
interesting too is like the sovereignty, at least from like one of the things that's made me most interested in sovereignty is like, then you individually can have rights, but then also like collectively, like whatever like political group you've defined as the polity basically,
Yeah.
then together you can accomplish things. And I think that's one of the things one of the great potentials of
Yeah.
our tribal sovereignty system, although there's many flaws, is that certain Indian tribes have been able to achieve some level of prosperity despite all the odds and despite all the discrimination by the federal government over the centuries. I mean, the one that comes to mind that I learned about, which is actually like insane, is my understanding is like the Seminoles
Oh, yeah.
own the Hard Rock Casino.
Yeah.
But that's such a shocking, for most outsiders, that's such a shocking example because most of the stories of like Indian economic sovereignty is usually like a casino, but they're not like getting rich off the casino. You know what I mean? It's not like an
Yeah.
international casino brand. And so on that point, like what is your vision of maybe not the Seminoles, but
Oh, for the Tunica.
for the Tunica, of an economic sovereignty that doesn't just mean a casino, but means like the people here are getting richer, incomes are going up, the kids can stay here and have jobs.
I'll be the first person to
cetera.
tell you that the casino makes us poor. Maybe they got something good going on in the Seminoles, but as a whole, Indian country, I would just say it's a bad entity. When you have a casino on tribal land, for your tribal community and everything, you can make $100 million, but guess what? Your citizens are going to go there. They're going to get addictions.
Right.
Nothing else to do. You put money above our peoples, and money is the root of all evil. And when we talk about economic prosperity, yes, I do want to build structures. Yes, I do want to help my peoples build beautiful buildings like this. But it really comes down to the land. It comes back to the food, because all these things are nice. So this building is beautiful. Those lands are beautiful, but you can't feed your people. That means nothing. And I know the future. I go through America all the time. Been knowing history my whole life. The first history lesson I ever got was the genocide of my people by my grandma. But when I traveled through St. Louis, through Chicago, it used to be known as a prairie state. 99% of its original prairie is gone. Only 0.1% of its original prairie is there. When you drive through Illinois, the land is dying. When you drive to Louisiana, you see these oil rigs. We have a clock against climate change. Mother Earth is about to, she's, she's about to go off on us. So to me, when it comes to building structures for our future economically, it begins with land. My brother's actually the head organic farmer.
On the agriculture,
yeah, on the agriculture.
right, yeah.
My cousin Louis. It's funny because my family, the Chicago clan, what they call it, we were the farmers, and we moved up to Chicago, and like we started organic farming up in Chicago. Then they brought the city boys back down to start the farming. So we've been doing that project for 2 years, and I actually just had the strawberries yesterday, and I could tell you like right hand to God, like that was the best strawberries I ever had in my whole life. Like it was like jam. So it's like when we're talking about like organic food like that's why I see the vision.
Right.
I see all of Marksville, all of central Louisiana being fed, because I believe American Indians, like what we got is, we understand the land. We are the land. We're interwoven in the land.
Right.
So that ability to elevate it, to use it for what you want, like the number one problem, we gotta feed our peoples.
Right.
People need food and shelter, so that's the number one problem. And I believe that goes back to the language. That goes back to organic farming. Like I said, Illinois is factory farming, caring the land.
Sustainable
Just-
tourism,
exactly.
sustainable as opposed to potentially extractive.
Yes, and
toxic,
generations, and
yeah.
even for structures. So once you got the food down, you focus on housing and structures, because it's you got to keep your people in homeostasis. You got to make sure they're fed, clothed. Because in my opinion, American Indians make art, and it's like we just make really amazing art.
And how do you? But the thing is, how do you win like in a whatever, like a tribal politics or tribal community building mobilization side? Like, how do you build like the buy-in for that? Given what you're talking about, how like there's been so much, especially with the older generations, what I mean, because there's been so much entrenched like.
Generational trauma.
Shame, whatever, exactly. It's generational trauma. And so many of them, I think, are probably more. I feel like there's like, there's certain, elders that have been like doing the work, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then even the more modern ones are doing the work. But so how do you bring on board people that it might be more like, they might view some of these ideas as more like radical, right? Or is this like,
well, the thing
is
is
this socialism or something like that? I don't know what the response
agree.
would be. I can
No,
just think
you're
about my
100%,
grandparents,
you're
right?
right, yeah.
And so
This
how
is
do you like,
communism.
do you try to like meet people where they are? Like how do you think about that, right? It's like convincing people and bringing people that you want to help over to your side, like ideas wise.
It goes back to two things. Okay. All my answers: dancing and a language.
Yeah.
Art. So as a young tribal citizen, I love my tribe. I love all my elders. I would like literally die for my tribe because I can't. The strength it is given my peoples. I'll do anything for my people.
Right.
But when it comes to like I paint. So I try to show them a picture. It really comes back to art because we saw Patrick today dancing. We saw Braylon today painting. I like to paint. I like designing. We got a bunch of designers in this tribe. We got people, doing art. And I believe, like, as we had the biggest collection of trade throughout the 18th century, but that was glass beads. It was our art. It was the tunics. It was everything. People fell in love with our art. They didn't fall in love with no casino.
Right.
And when we were the most prosperous, we were just doing art. So that's how I view it. I believe like building connections. Like I wish I had a painting. I would.
It's like establishing that trust, kind of
Exactly.
a little bit. I totally agree with that. That's very interesting because one of the things I've thought about is with like my Louisiana wide work. One of the things I like the most about it is not just that I get to like preserve the languages and help be a part of that, but it's one of the few things where I get to meet people from like literally across the political spectrum. And just because we connect on the culture, the language, they don't think to like be divided on these other ideas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, whereas often like if a left-wing person and a right-wing person, for like a left-wing person from the Bywater in New Orleans and a right-wing person, let's say from like Acadia Parish, they're not gonna be in the same room or like have similar interests.
Yeah.
But the fact that we put forward and made more salient like this common culture and our love of land and culture and language, then people just think about that and that we have that in common as opposed to focusing on what divides us. And so it's just interesting because you're kind of saying in your own way like a similar thing of like reminding them to see me as like part of the family or part of the tribe, literally part of the nation, as opposed to like the different. And then once you do that, like then the conversation is just so much easier because then you guys already are like basically all family. So you know what I mean? You have to kind of like remind each other of it, right? Like we're all in this together kind of thing, right?
Yeah, even you said like all these people from different groups, you get them in the same building,
right?
Which is very, very rare. Like, which I love the tribe, but you don't get like a city boy like me from Chicago the South Side, to be here, you know, around
And like all the
March-
shades of the rainbow,
Yeah,
basically.
all the shades
are
of the
over there at
rainbow,
powwow,
and that's
yeah.
why it's like I'm such a big believer on indigenous nations because diversity is the greatest strength of humanity. And you know, I was taught that my whole life. And when I see the most diverse place, I want to go to Louisiana. It's gumbo, you know. Yeah.
No, totally. Okay, so then like another harder, like another kind of like practical
Yeah.
question about how do you deal with the powers that be, but like thinking about external to the tribe. And so like one of the things you talk about is that your chairman and then also with throughout your tribe's history has been able to have connections
Yes.
and power and a platform because of the organizing and the tribal sovereignty that you guys have established for yourselves. But then a lot of that is working with people that like he might not like, you guys might
Oh,
not
yeah.
like, you might not like personally. And so what do you view as like, how are you going to deal with that? Whether it's the Trump administration or how do y'all, you personally, how do you think y'all can deal with that, right? Of this thing where it's like, and I know you have a lot of like still justified anger and
Yeah.
like frustration with like, you know, the federal government, et cetera. And it's not like a kumbaya kind of approach for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you can't just, you also don't want to just, you want to make progress is what I say. I don't want, so how
Yeah.
do you balance that of like meeting with people that might not be the most, your best friends?
No, I'll talk to anyone. I'll talk to a
Yeah.
KKK member, if I to be honest. I think talking to someone's very important because at the end of the day, no one's educated on American history.
Right.
Like, we're literally taught propaganda in the sense we're spit out the room. So you gotta, you know, walk in with grace in every room because, you know, education is a blessing. You know, this conversation is a blessing. Learning about the French is a blessing. Learning about Tunica is a blessing because, you know, great cultures, diversity is our greatest strength. So when it comes to that, you know, you gotta speak to everyone because if our voice is the most powerful thing, and you know, that doesn't mean you don't like be a politician and be like, no, you know, go both ways. It's just whatever you advocate for your peoples, you advocate for food sovereignty because what I care about, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I don't even vote.
Right.
But for me, it's about feeding my people, housing my people, getting them food and resources, shelter. So if I had to talk to Trump, if I had to talk to Biden, if I had to talk to Putin, I'll talk to them. I might not like any of them because I don't.
Right.
But it's still like, you know, like it's very important to advocate for indigenous people
What
everywhere.
leadership is needed, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you know, just it doesn't matter. You know, I'm sure the Ukrainians would talk to Putin even though Putin's, you know, discriminating them, destroying.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you gotta
exactly.
advocate for your people.
You
no matter
gotta
what.
you gotta do the deal to get it done.
Yeah.
And so, kind of similarly though, what is your vision? Because I know you're a big like advocate for like land back and
Yeah.
restoring not just tribal sovereignty in general, but specifically as it relates to land that is currently belongs to the tribe and that should belong or should have belonged. But so, how do you view though at the same time, or are you interested in, especially because you're half Mexican, right? Too.
Yeah.
How do you view though then like how can the tribes, obviously the Tunica Biloxi, you guys have your own interests, right? And then
Yeah.
other tribes have like, together you guys have like Indian country interests. But is there a way that, but you're also in solidarity with like Mexicans,
Yeah, indigenous peoples.
whatever, poor white people,
Yeah.
all types of, you know, suffering or oppressed people to varying extent. I'm not saying anyone
No,
is on the
100%.
same level.
Yeah.
But they're also like, they live around here too. And so do you think about that of like coalition building beyond the tribe or beyond Indian country even? Or
they're-
are you still like on step one of Indian country? Yeah.
I think it's going back to language is always important. You know, gotta get the language. But even doing that, like, I'm a big believer on solidarity with the indigenous people. 90% of Mexicans are not indigenous.
Yeah, right.
Spanish is colonial language too. Blah blah blah.
But that's a whole other
But I was actually looking at like Nata because my dad comes out of Jalisco, Guadalajara. But they spoke like Coco, like Nata. So you know, more indigenous languages. You know, the Mexica Empire and everything. So I think it's very important as like indigenous people as a whole, and not just in America, but the indigenous people in
Yeah,
Palestine,
throughout the Americas,
over
throughout
the
the world,
globe.
of course, yeah,
Like we
exactly.
have to need to come together because at the end of the day, is the Tunica Biloxi could make $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
But if every other tribe's poor, how do you think the air is gonna be?
Right.
How do you think the food's gonna be? Like I said, I'm not a big person on money. I love structures. I love clean air. I love fresh food. I love people to be fed. So to me, when it comes to Mexicans, when it comes to indigenous people of Latin America, we need them, and obviously they need help too because they need to be educated. Like I said, like my dad didn't know he was Native American, and he's the dark one. My mom was like the lighter, obviously civilization, until he was 40s. I'm like, you know, you're from Mexico, right? He's like, yeah, I'm from Mexico. I'm like, what do you think before that? He's like, Spanish, because a lot of Mexicans like, you know, we speak Spanish, so we like to be prideful in that root because it's our language now. But it's like, you know, it clicked. I'm like, you're Mexican, bro. You're indigenous to Jalisco. And he's like, I guess I am.
Right.
And even my grandfather, who was actually a coyote, he was actually a Lido He's a citizen now, but
A coyote? What does that mean?
he snuck people over the border.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But even like,
Interesting, wow.
he would grab my hair like literally 2 years ago because like we were out long. He was like Indio, because you know when Columbus came here, they're like Indios.
Yeah,
They're like
yeah.
Indio. I'm like to Indio. He's like, no.
That's a whole other thing.
He started laughing. I'm like, bro, I'm like, you're and he's brown.
Obviously, I mean, right.
So it's like, as Mexicans as a whole, we need to come together. You know, Latin Americans really, but obviously Mexican Americans. That's gonna be the biggest population in America in 2040, which is AKA indigenous
Right,
people.
right.
So that's gonna be very, very interesting because because I'm Mexican. We're white supremacists. It's machismo culture. Like I said, going back to the Spanish, English language, a lot of white supremacist ideals.
Right.
So to me, it's very interesting. I think Mexicans go 2 ways, like the Spanish way or the indigenous way. Mexico City's sinking because they went the Spanish way. They used to live in precise in the indigenous way. So
And the peaceful with nature. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because what you're saying about I really believe about the whole equality and like being shoulder to shoulder, like both as individuals and also like groups.
Yeah.
And I hope, I believe that we've actually made a lot of progress as a world over not all the progress we need to make,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful for like the social movements that got us to where we are, and then post-World War II peace between nations relatively based on what happened before. And so you really do see that, but the key is like looking like eye to eye, as opposed to like down on people or up to people. And there's this really good quote from like the current Mexican president, actually, Claudia Sheinbaum. And it's something along the lines of like, there's only one, you look at people in the eyes, you should always look at people like face to face on the same level. And she said there's only one good way to look down on people, and it's when you give them the hand to pull them up to get to your level. And I was like, when she showed that, it gave me goosebumps. And I think it's such a powerful thing about, she's not indigenous actually, which is a whole interesting thing. She's like of Jewish descent, and now an atheist, I think, but then still full like in Mexican culture, always like honoring like the Catholic, the Catholic traditions. She's all about the people is what I mean.
Yeah.
Even though her name is whatever,
Yeah.
she's fully that. And that's what I think is interesting is like, that's the whole other side of like, she wasn't indigenous, but then now she's been like doing some of the most work for indigenous peoples of anyone. So it's just like,
Yeah, it's interesting.
it's all about like, we're all different. But basically I'm
Yeah.
saying like, we're all different, but we all have a place to play and like making our community the better place or making our nation, our country, whatever level you want to act at,
I mean, it is very, like for me, like I said, I don't partake in colonial politics.
Right.
Usually, every president to me, I'm like, bro, you're the oppressor. But she does. I have to say it. She is a great representation.
Well, because this is my thing too, is like with the colonial politics, I was going to say like, I do think that, anyway, I feel like you have a lot of work to do, but like,
Yeah.
I do think there is like a space for that. I'm not saying like you should do anything you don't want to do, but I do think that like figures like Deb Haaland really had like an enormous impact on educating and making progress, you know what I mean? Just because it's very unfortunate that like indigenous people are so, like we just don't know enough about them, there's not enough money going to them. It's not a big topic in politics.
Yeah.
And so that's my thing is like, even politicizing it is good. So I just feel like, anyway, so I just see the other side of it. Even though there's frustrations of like dealing with the, whatever, like you're calling it colonized politics.
When those
whatever.
Indians become the white man.
What do you mean?
Like when they become the white man.
But do you think but isn't there a way to do it that it's not? Do you know what I mean? Or do you not think so?
You know that New Zealand
Like
lady?
is Deb a white man?
No, not yet at least.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
right.
That's interesting because I really want to talk about this because every other Native politician has sold out to the white man. I'm not gonna
You think, yeah.
No, I don't think. They could just,
That's
anti-indigenous.
basically- yeah, right,
I'll
right.
say that.
And there's not that many of them to start off with.
Those are all for it. They could,
Right.
Yeah, I met them too, and it's very unfortunate that they're anti-indigenous and not with the indigenous people of the globe.
Interesting.
Because at the end of the day, when it comes to politics, you gotta play with big money.
Or the other ones I think about
Which
are
is,
like,
going
yeah, go
back,
ahead.
sorry, big money. What's big money associated with? Big oil.
Well, right, no, I know.
What's big oil associated with? MMIW. So the moment you step in politics,
MMIW?
murder missing indigenous women.
Oh, yeah.
So it's literally the moment you step into politics, you have to realize you're supporting the companies that are literally destroying our lands.
Or fighting against them, though, depending.
But
that's
most
the
of
thing is
us
I
have
just see-
turned to fight with them.
I see you. But yeah, but my thing is like I see other examples like in the Alaska case.
Yeah.
There was that they had Mary Peltola who was
Yeah.
and I think she might, I don't know, you might correct me. She was kind of, I thought she was decent, but well, I mean, it's the point I'm trying to make is not her specifically.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that even the white politicians in Alaska, like Lisa Murkowski, have to be kind of good on indigenous issues or better because like the indigenous,
Yeah.
they have real power in the state. And so that's just what I'm saying is like, how can we get not just within the tribe, like you guys are getting done, but that like the governor and the senators know that they also need to deliver?
It is a very important question. I'm probably, I'm a very tribal politician. I'm very for my tribe.
By and for the people,
Yeah, by for the people. Because like I said, could MLK become president? Like, would it have been possible? It would have been a beautiful future, a beautiful thing. But would it have been actually possible to put someone with that visionary, revolutionary mind into that power? And that's where I get to, like, that's why I'm more like, is it really possible to put someone that's like,
without changing the person?
We're gonna bring the land back. We're gonna bring without going against, because you're going against the biggest corporate entities on the planet that literally destroyed our people. So it is. I'm not saying it's impossible, because I do believe we need to try every avenue as a people. I'm not gonna try the avenue though, because I see my people been doing avenue for 500 years, and it's like my people still got to eat. Like, we're still not fully fed.
Right. No, definitely. Interesting. Okay, so then another thing before we talk about politics, economics, culture, and so I want to talk about like spirituality a little bit. And so tell me about indigenous spirituality. So you could have like sea religion, spirituality, your religion, spirituality.
I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, so.
A Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah,
that's like
door to door.
Wow, that's intense. That's like basically they think everyone else is going to hell, right? I don't mean to be rude.
Only 144,000 people are going to the next ward. I'm not Jehovah's Witness.
That's the number?
Yeah, 144,000.
Wow. Okay, so then are you that anymore?
I'm not Jehovah's Witness anymore.
Is anyone in your family that anymore?
Yeah, some people. Like, that's why like spirituality is such a very interesting thing, because like I've been told at a young age, like, your truth is your truth. It's a very powerful thing. And I believe as Indians, like these mountains, like we're always praying to the same people. Not all Indians. Like, we did have some woman in our story, our creation story and everything. But not all Indians were like, I agree with you. We were not a monolith. People.
But here in Tunica, Biloxi, that's what I mean. Can you tell me more about but like, because most people are Christian, right? But then there's significant incorporation of spiritual.
Yeah.
So can you tell me
we
about
have
that?
some people that full on practice
The traditional spiritual.
the thunder beings and everything.
Can you elaborate on? So tell me.
Oh, okay.
Creation story to start from the beginning, like the basics.
Okay. So yeah, we do have people that believe in the creation story.
Okay.
I'm gonna butcher the creation story a little bit. So practically, the fisherman saw the sun woman, and the sun woman was like the most beautiful woman ever. So he was like, I gotta get there. So he was like, I don't know how to get there. Like, I'm in the ocean, the sun's all the way up in the sky. So he was like, okay, I'm gonna give it to the black girl, Cushimele, to climb to the high street. Cushimele climbed to the high street. Then he saw the sun eagle, Tahachi Kuchute, and Tahachi Kuchute went up to the sun woman, and he gives this gift to the fisherman. And the sun woman was like, thank you. And she promised us this. She was like, as long as the sun is shining, the Indian people will be here. And that's a very basic line of our creation story. Is a promise from the sun. We are promised from the sun will always be here. Still are, we got genocide, we still are. And we have people that form, like myself, included, but we have a lot of people.
Does that mean they've been like passed down like through oral tradition?
It's been songs, old tradition, textbooks. Like I said, we're always revitalizing it as we bring back our language, as we bring back our mind.
Right.
Be able to fully understand it, because we're like, what does this mean in Tunica or Biloxi? Because you can't translate it.
Okay.
We don't understand what it really means.
And then I guess a lot of it is like what we were doing at the, it's a lot of songs and dances and kind of like what Patrick was saying about how when he dances, it's like
the great spirit. So the dancers, for example, like, he's like, I'm a dancer. Patrick's like a regalia, powwow. Like, for me, I'm more of like at a bar or club dancer. But even then, like, when I do it, it's like I do it because it's a good vibe, good energy, and it really is like the great spirit is. When he described it, he's like, the great spirits almost took over your body. It's not even your dancing; it's your spirit's dancing. It's a celebration, and I 100% feel that, because like I wasn't dancing as a kid, and obviously, we always go through, especially as American Indians, identity crisis. American Indians have the highest suicide rate in the country. American Indian men are, it's really an epidemic, really is, and American Indian men we're great peoples. However, because they've been beat down because of all these things, it's tough. It's tough to be proud. So it's always important to be proud of who we are.
You have to bring it forward. Okay, so the last thing is with the language. That's another way. It's like
language.
It's both you keep the culture alive. Also, you connect to the ancestors.
It goes back, because when you think about how do we cultivate this area of the English or Tunica?
Or at least all of the above.
All of the above is the best answer. But that's correct. That's the correct answer because
yeah,
you guys talk to the French.
Just English is like
yeah,
not
just.
gonna work,
But I would
right?
say, when we were speaking like.
Well, it's not gonna because everywhere speaks English. It's not gonna make it. That's what we tell people with the Louisiana.
yeah.
It's like if like at Mississippi they speak English. There's no reason to go to Louisiana.
Yeah, I agree. But for Central Louisiana, I do believe the best way to cultivate this
speak
land,
your language first.
speak our language, and even like I said, there's gonna be a day where Americans are not gonna be able to eat. I'm telling you, I already see this coming. It's gonna be a day where that electricity might not come on. But then you're gonna see Indians be like, what? They got food sovereignty, they got all this land. So that's why I think about land back. Land back is, to me, it's land back or human extinction. That's how, that's how I know it, because if the indigenous people, if the fathers, if the sons did not correct their father's sin, it's gonna keep on getting passed down. And the indigenous people is the ultimate original sin of America. So until we get our land back.
What do you think is gonna happen with like the other people?
I mean,
just the counterpoint.
So the thing is, people always be like, "Oh, what are you gonna do with other people?" Okay, we got Mexicans.
I'm just asking.
No, I love world. But we got all these Indians. Like, you see me, you see my cousins we have the whole day. We got groups of all the people. It's not like, yo, bye family.
So it'd still be like, it's sort of like the Palestine one-state solution, where it's like everybody would be allowed to live there, but
exactly. But even then, it's like the white people that work for my tribe, they like it better. Even when, even the stories about going back to early days of colonization, when the Indians would capture the white people, they were like, I don't want to go back. And there's so many cases, even Thomas Jefferson talked about it. He's like, I don't want to go back to these society. I would rather be a prisoner in our society where the food is fresh, clean air, dancing, singing, versus to be in their society. And like I said, if America wants to feed their people, they should do it. If America wants to keep the air clean, they should do it.
Right.
But America doesn't do it.
At least, and then I would say, I have I'm an outsider perspective, but I think at the very least, what I've noticed is that when there is more, that's one of the great things about our system is that if you can provide more sovereignty, really, or more power over decision making, or at least a seat at the table, really for all groups, but especially whether it's workers and employers, like that's what it's supposed to be. Whether it's like homeowners versus renters, all those kind of different groups in society that have specific needs. But like really the whole reason tribal sovereignty was created is like the native tribes since the beginning of the republic had very specific needs that were like obviously disrespected, genocided, etc. And so like now what I would say is that I don't know what vision it would take, but at the very least like increasing tribal sovereignty, having the natives tribes have a greater role like in the future of their own lands, but also of the states that they're in or multiple states that they're in, like the Navajo or whatever. And in the country as a whole, I just think it was only going to benefit everyone. You know what I mean? To your point.
I know I might sound a little radical, but this is how I kind of view it. I believe that this is how I would view perfect government. The tribal nation, the friends of community, the friends of the tribal nation, and the community. And those are the people that should be making the decisions. Because for me, coming from Chicago, you think I'm gonna know the best things about Marksville, Louisiana?
Well, right.
This is where the river is. This is how you shoot an alligator. No.
No, I agree totally. And that's one of the reasons. I'm a believer in like the federalist system or the potential thereof. You know what I mean? Because I do think that it's like it's good to be human, the human species, and like to do stuff together. But it's really hard to like abstract as a human that like, oh, I'm just a human. Like most of us like to be a part of a community.
Yes.
And then like that's why I think the tribes are also like the indigenous tribes of America are a great model for other Americans, other people in the world about how we can like better deal with our problems in our communities. Like I live in New Orleans and like every neighborhood has problems, and we used to have more of these like Creole neighborhood association types groups that like people looked after each other. They decide like what can we build in the neighborhood together and stop having other people decide for us and decide for ourselves. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. And it'll be interesting to see like both like in the next few years, the next few months, but also like years and decades, how it develops and like I feel like the role you'll play in it. And so then two last questions. Real quick. One, can we do some like basic Tunica words?
Oh yeah, I'll just get an introduction. So Henny,
hello?
Hello.
Okay, yeah.
So we're just gonna do Henny.
Henny.
So I'm gonna do Ima Nakushimeli Atisha, so that my name is Blackbear.
Oh wait, say that again.
Ima Nakushimeli Atisha. So
Ima?
You say you're gonna be Ima Will?
Ima Will.
How you say it? McGrew?
McGrew, yeah.
McGrew Atisa.
Ima Will McGrew
Atifa. Hey,
that means my name is Will
Yeah,
McGrew.
hey, my name's Will McGrew.
Okay, we're gonna put the subtitles on this so people get it. But
That's fine.
okay, anything else?
And
Takash?
Takash thank you, and Hita means goodbye.
Pizza means goodbye. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to say to like
Oh, yeah.
to the world or to the president or whatever, to the governor or like something in Tunica or otherwise before we?
Well, Trump's all Europeans are illegal. No, I'm joking. But we actually really want to talk about blood quantum because I do think blood quantum is and we might have touched on this before, but even to my own tribal peoples. The thing is, like I said, going back, we've been assimilated since the 1500s. I know my DNA. I know the tribe's DNA. Most people in my generation is 1% to 2% indigenous to this area. People be like, oh, you know what I mean? But we literally have our ancestry tracks from all the way, from the 1500s. So we have a problem, not even just my tribe, but in Indian countries, like I'm more Indian than you. I'm more Indian than you. First off, you're scientifically wrong. But also, you're wrong on because like you're going back to the KKK ideals of like blood quantum. Blood quantum was literally made by white supremacists in order to take our land. When you support these racist policies, you're anti-Indian. You're bringing our people back. So it's just really important, to understand our culture, our sovereignty is given to by the Creator. It's not given to us by no paper. If the United States government took our federal recognition tomorrow, it doesn't matter. We're still going to achieve our dream. We're still going to be our people. We're still going to feed our peoples. It's nice to advocate. We need to. We need a seat at the table. But it's more important to build our own table. And it really is to, we got to stop with blood quantum. That is a thing that, your outsider views might not understand, but going into blood quantum, the only people that have blood quantum is horses and American Indians. So practically is after one quarter, or every tribe is different, 164, you're erased.
Right.
And it's made of BS, like I said, because my great grandmother on the membership, she's 100% American Indian.
Right.
She wasn't. She was Afro-Indigenous.
Well, right, and like we've discussed previously, I think one of the most important things is like of the tribal sovereignty. I like I said, I'm more of a institutionalist. I kind of like hope that we can improve the system, but one of the things is like with the tribal sovereignty, like two of the things that definitely need to be improved is like one. My understanding is like the indigenous tribes should have more control over like determining citizenship, right? Because if you're sovereign, you have to be able to determine citizen. Yeah, well, right, exactly. And the things, but right. So, but then the other side of it is just the whole like legal jurisdiction over like non-citizens. I can give you.
So this is all tribes need to do. You need 30% signatures from the active voters. So my tribe's 1,700. So we're gonna say
to change the citizenship.
Yeah, to change for Constitution. So 30% of signatures, 30% of active voter signatures, which is about 300 in my tribe. You send that to the BIA. The BIA approves your Constitution. Then it goes to a secretary election. Then you need 51%. Then you could have adopted children on, which some tribes do. Because in my opinion, like I said, there was so many stories that American Indians would, adopt a Frenchie and like take him in, and he would only speak Apache, he would only speak Tunica, and like he was, he didn't speak any French. He was just, he was just that tribe. So it's like we're tribal nations. People say reservations. Reservations still the small-minded thinking.
It's a nation, right. That's the whole thing, But which is the whole point of the sovereignty. Cool. Well, to be continued. We'll be back to that
story. To be
story.
continued. Takash.
And then Takash, this was awesome.
I appreciate it. Merci beaucoup.
And then à la prochaine. On va parler plus tard.
I can't do that. Takash.
Cool.